Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Forgotten Carnival. Holly Arnold had always been drawn to the Isle of Wight's quiet allure, a place where the past and present danced in a delicate balance. The island was an escape from the chaos of her life on the mainland, a refuge where she could find solace in its rolling hills, serene beaches, and quaint villages. But it was also a place that held its share of secrets, shadows lurking just beneath the surface of its picturesque landscape. Holly wasn't looking for adventure or danger when she decided to spend a weekend there with her closest friends. She just wanted a brief escape. On a crisp autumn day, Holly and her friends Mark, Jess, and Danny decided to explore the island's lesser-known paths. They were an inseparable group, bound together by years of shared memories, inside jokes, and an unspoken promise to face whatever life threw at them as a unit. I found something interesting on an old map Danny had announced that morning. There's an abandoned site deep in the woods just past the village of Forgotten. The map calls it the Grand Carnival, but I've never heard of it. It could be fun to check out. Jess had scoffed, though her curiosity was piqued. Why would anyone build a carnival in the middle of the woods? Who knows? Maybe it was a rich eccentric's idea of fun. But if it's abandoned, it could be cool, or at least a good spot for some creepy photos. Holly had felt a slight unease at the idea. But her friends were excited, and she didn't want to be the one to spoil their adventure. By early afternoon, they had ventured deep into the woods, following Danny's directions and the increasingly faint trail on the map. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining like skeletal hands reaching for the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. After what felt like hours, they finally stumbled upon a clearing in the woods where the remnants of a carnival lay forgotten, swallowed by time and nature. Rusted rides stood like silent sentinels, their once bright paint peeling and faded. A rickety Ferris wheel loomed over the site, its carriages swaying gently in the breeze. The skeletal remains of a carousel sat nearby, the painted horses frozen in mid-gallop, the eyes wide and staring. "This is eerie," Jess muttered. Mark nodded, taking in the scene. "It's like time just stopped here." The group wandered through the abandoned carnival. Holly's unease grew with every moment. The place felt wrong, as if they were intruding on something that should have been left undisturbed. They reached the center of the carnival, where an old, tattered tent still stood, its once vibrant colors now dulled by age. A faded banner above the entrance read, "The Grand Carnival where dreams come true." Danny grinned and pushed the tent flap aside. "Shall we inside?" The air was thick, carrying the scent of mildew and something else, something sweet and cloying, like cotton candy that had long since spoiled. "This must have been the main attraction," Mark said. He brushed the dust off an old prop, a large wooden box with faded symbols carved into its surface. "Look at this," Jess called out from the back of the tent. She held one up, revealing an image of a grinning clown, its eyes wide and unnervingly lifelike. Beneath it, the words "had come one, come all experience the magic" were printed in bold, bright letters. "Creepy," Danny remarked. "Clowns always freak me out." She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something unseen was lurking just beyond the edge of the clearing. The sun was beginning to set when they decided to leave the tent. As they stepped outside, they noticed something strange. The air had grown thick with fog, obscuring the trees around them. The temperature had dropped, and a cold wind whispered through the clearing, carrying with it the distant sound of music. Holly asked, her voice trembling. The others fell silent, listening. The faint strains of carnival music floated through the air, growing louder with each passing moment. It was the same tune they had heard from the old carousel, but now it was distorted, warped, as if being played on a broken record. Mark asked, his face pale. "I don't know," Danny replied. "We need to get out of here." But as they turned to leave, the path they had taken into the clearing was gone. The carnival, which had seemed small and contained when they arrived, now stretched out before them, the rides no longer appearing old and decrepit but glowing with an unnatural light. The Ferris wheel creaked to life, its rusty gears groaning as it began to turn. The carousel's horses moved in a slow, sinister circle, their eyes glowing in the dim light. The tent they had just exited flapped in the wind, the banner now reading "The Grand Carnival where nightmares come true." Panic set in as they realized they were trapped, the carnival itself seeming to come alive around them. The music grew louder, a maddening cacophony that drowned out their thoughts. Holly screamed, grabbing Jess's hand and pulling her away from the tent. The group bolted through the clearing, their footsteps echoing against the ground as they dodged between the rides. But no matter how fast they ran, the carnival seemed to stretch on forever, the fog thickening around them, the lights of the rides flickering in and out of existence like taunting phantoms. Mark was the first to stumble, his foot catching on a twisted root that had not been there moments before. He hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him. Holly and Jess stopped to help him, but as they reached down, Mark's eyes widened in horror. It's pulling me," he gasped. Danny rushed to help, but it was too late. Mark's screams echoed through the night as he was yanked into the fog, disappearing from sight. Holly could only stare in shock as the fog swallowed him whole. "What?" Danny shouted, grabbing Holly and Jess by the arms and dragging them away. They ran blindly through the fog, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The music grew louder, pounding in their ears like a heartbeat, relentless and unending. They could feel the ground shifting beneath their feet, as if the very earth were trying to pull them back. But the carnival wasn't finished with them yet. As they reached the edge of the clearing, the Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its lights flashing in a dizzying pattern. Holly could see figures moving within the carriages, shadowy shapes that seemed to be watching them, waiting. Jess cried, her voice barely audible over the music. Danny yelled back, his voice filled with despair. But Holly wasn't listening. She could see something moving in the fog ahead of them, a figure stepping out from the shadows. It was the clown from the poster, its painted face grinning wildly, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "And no, this isn't real," Holly whispered. But the clown advanced, its movements slow and deliberate, its grin widening as it reached out a gloved hand. "Join us," it whispered. "The carnival is waiting." Holly turned and ran. Jess and Danny were right behind her, their footsteps echoing in the night. But no matter how fast they ran, the carnival was always there, just at the edge of their vision, the rides moving of their own accord, the music playing louder and louder. They reached the edge of the woods, the fog thinning as the trees became more sparse. Holly could see the lights of a village in the distance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Danny shouted, his voice filled with relief. But just as they thought they were safe, the ground beneath them shifted. Holly felt her foot sink into something soft and wet, and she realized with horror that the earth itself was turning against them. The ground was no longer solid, but a churning mass of mud and roots that seemed to be pulling them down. Jess screamed, her legs trapped in the muck. Holly and Danny tried to pull her free, but the more they struggled, the deeper she sank. Holly cried, tears streaming down her face as she tried to hold onto Jess's hand. But it was no use. The ground swallowed her whole, her screams cutting off abruptly as she disappeared beneath the surface. Holly and Danny were the only ones left. They stumbled forward, barely able to keep their footing as the ground shifted beneath them. The village was so close, but it might as well have been 1,000 miles away. The carnival was closing in, the distorted music and flickering lights now a maddening pulse that seemed to sync with Holly's racing heartbeat. The fog thickened again, swirling around them like a living entity, pushing them back toward the malevolent heart of the carnival. Holly and Danny could barely see a few feet ahead as they staggered forward, clinging to the faint hope that the village might offer some refuge from the nightmare. But then the ground shifted beneath them once more, and Holly felt her stomach lurch as the earth opened up, swallowing her and Danny into a chasm of darkness. She screamed as she fell, the sound of Danny's terrified cries echoing in the void. The world became a blur of spinning shadows and cold, grasping hands as they were pulled deeper into the abyss. Holly hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her. For a moment, everything went dark, and she was sure she'd lost consciousness. But then she heard it, the soft, insidious whisper of carnival music echoing from somewhere deep within the darkness. Her eyes fluttered open, and she realized she was lying on cold, damp earth in what appeared to be an underground tunnel. Danny's voice came from somewhere nearby, weak and filled with fear. She turned her head and saw him a few feet away, struggling to sit up. His face was pale, smeared with dirt and sweat. They were alone in a tunnel, the walls around them damp and slick with something that glistened faintly in the dim light. "Ah?" Holly whispered, though she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the answer. "I don't know," Danny replied. "Yeah, but we need to get out of here, before it finds us." Holly nodded. The tunnel stretched out before them in both directions, an endless corridor of darkness that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. They began to move, stumbling forward through the tunnel, their hands brushing against the cold, slimy walls for support. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the faint scent of decay and something else, something sweet and rotten, like the scent of candy left to spoil in the sun. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the whispers grew louder, the music more distinct. It wasn't just in their heads, there was something down here with them, something ancient and hungry. The tunnel began to slope upward, the ground becoming more uneven beneath their feet. Holly's legs ached and her breath came in ragged gasps, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had to. There was no going back and no staying still. The only option was to push forward, no matter how terrifying the unknown might be. After what felt like hours, they emerged from the tunnel into a vast underground chamber. The walls of the chamber were covered in faded, peeling posters of the old carnival, the images twisted and grotesque in the dim light. The floor was littered with debris, broken toys, rotting wood, and the remnants of carnival games that had long since been abandoned. In the center of the chamber stood a figure shrouded in darkness. It was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally elongated, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Holly's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was, the clown from the poster, the one they had seen in the tent. But it was no longer just an image on paper. It was real, and it was waiting for them. "Welcome," the clown rasped. "You've come to play, haven't you?" Danny backed away. No, this isn't real. This can't be real." The clown's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp. "Oh, but it is. And the carnival never forgets its guests." Holly's mind raced. But there was no escape. The tunnel had closed behind them, the walls solid and unyielding. They were trapped in the heart of the carnival, and the clown was blocking their only exit. "You can't leave," the clown hissed. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. "Not until you've had your fun." With that, the lights in the chamber flickered on. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one reflecting a distorted version of reality. In the reflections, Holly saw herself and Danny, but they were different, twisted, grotesque versions of themselves, their faces contorted in fear and pain. The chamber was also filled with carnival rides, each one more twisted and nightmarish than the last. The Ferris wheel loomed in one corner, its carriages now filled with skeletons dressed in rotting carnival attire. The carousel stood nearby, its horses now transformed into monstrous creatures with gaping mouths and razor-sharp teeth. And at the center of it all was the clown, its eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light. "You'll never leave," the clown whispered. "Not until the carnival has claimed you." Holly felt a cold hand grip her arm, and she turned to see Danny. "Holly, what do we do?" The fear was overwhelming, paralyzing her thoughts. But then, in the corner of her vision, she noticed something, an old, rusted lever on the wall, partially hidden behind a pile of debris. It was the only thing in the chamber that seemed out of place, something that didn't belong to the twisted carnival. Without thinking, Holly lunged for the lever, her fingers closing around the cold metal. The clown's eyes widened in surprise, and it let out a shriek of rage as she pulled the lever with all her strength. The chamber shuddered, and the lights flickered violently. The ground beneath them began to tremble, cracks appearing in the floor as the entire carnival seemed to groan in protest. "What have you done?" the clown screamed. Holly didn't answer. She grabbed Danny's hand and pulled him toward the only exit that had appeared, a narrow passageway that had opened up in the far wall, leading out of the chamber. They ran, the ground shaking beneath their feet, the walls crumbling around them as the carnival began to collapse. The screams of the clown echoed behind them, growing more distant with each passing moment. The passageway was long and winding, but they didn't stop. They could feel the carnival collapsing around them, the walls closing in, the ground shifting beneath their feet. But the light at the end of the tunnel was growing closer, a faint glimmer of hope in the darkness. Finally, they burst out of the passageway and into the open air. The cold night air hit them like a wave, and they stumbled forward, collapsing onto the ground. Behind them, the entrance to the passageway sealed shut, the ground solid and unyielding once more. Holly and Danny lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. The carnival was gone, swallowed by the earth, leaving no trace of its existence. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, the distant call of an owl, and the rhythmic pounding of their own hearts. "We made it," Danny whispered. Holly nodded, unable to speak. She stared up at the night sky, the stars twinkling above them like distant beacons. They had survived, but the memory of the carnival would haunt them forever, a shadow that would never fully fade. As they slowly got to their feet and began the long walk back to the village, Holly couldn't help but glance over her shoulder one last time. The woods were quiet now, the fog lifted, but she knew the carnival wasn't truly gone. It was just waiting, biding its time in the forgotten corners of the island, ready to claim its next victims. And she knew, deep down, that they had been lucky. Because once you enter the carnival's domain, not everyone gets to leave. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.